this is something cool. This is from a little bit ago, but this is an important thing to look at, especially with some of the stuff that we talk about on this show. Finland ends homelessness and provides shelter for all in need. So now I don't think they completely ended it, but they've really made a lot of strides. Here's what's happening here. I don't know if there's absolutely no homeless people in Finland. I don't know. I think that'd be very difficult to accomplish. Maybe they did, but I think here's what's going on. In Finland, the number of homeless people has fallen sharply. The reason: the country applies the housing first concept. Those affected by homelessness receive a small apartment and counseling without any preconditions. 4 out of 5 people affected thus make their way back into a stable life. And all of this is cheaper than accepting homelessness. I mean, just think about that just initially. If you don't have a house, like everything is a challenge. Obviously, if you don't have a house, you don't have a place to live. I mean, just right there, your ability to do anything else is so greatly compromised. And, all right, so in 2008, the Finnish government introduced a new policy for the homeless, housing first. And this has been successful. It is the only EU country where the number of homeless people is declining. How is everyone given a residence in Finland? It is the NGOs such as the Y Foundation that provide housing for people in need. They take care of the construction themselves, buy flats on the private housing market, and renovate existing flats. The apartments have 1 to 2 rooms. In addition to that, former emergency shelters have been converted into apartments in order to offer long-term housing. Homeless people turn into tenants with a tenancy agreement. They also have to pay rent and operating costs. Social workers who have offices in the residential building help with financial issues such as applications for social benefits. So they help these people get what they are entitled to. That's essentially what they're doing. We could do something like this in the United States. Any country could do something like this. Especially here in the United States, we have the space for it. We have more than enough space for it. So the policy applied is called Housing First. It reverses conventional homeless aid. More commonly, those affected are expected to look for a job and free themselves from their psychological problems or addiction. Only then they can get help finding accommodation. Housing First, on the other hand, reverses the path. Homeless people get a flat without any preconditions, and social workers help them get the benefits they need. In such a new, secure situation, it is easier for those affected to find a job and take care of their physical and mental health. And what are the results of that? 4 out of 5 homeless people will be able to keep their flat for a long time with Housing First and lead a more stable life. So the people who are on the streets and who are suffering from conditions that prohibit them from being able to hold down a job or get a house, which, by the way, in the United States, 44% of homeless people have a job, by the way. But the ones that don't because they can't, they're sick and they need help. And if we put a shelter over them and got them counseling, that would be a significant step for them, as opposed to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And for the 44% of homeless people who already have a job, giving them a Housing First initiative where you put them in housing, where you get them the benefits they're entitled to, and you help them rebuild their lives with the job they already have, well, that's going to be a big step. And that's going to be a big step to solving our society. Now, of course, living wages are a huge issue too, because nobody who works an honest job in the United States shouldn't be able to afford a place to live. Nobody. That shouldn't happen. If you're working an honest job, you should be able to survive. End of story. End of freaking story. Especially when CEOs make 475 times that of the average worker. 475 times to 1. There's a problem. There's a huge problem. Full stop. But, you know, trying to keep it to housing for the sake of this segment, this is totally right on. Housing first. That's the way to go. It's working. Now, I know I have ruffled some feathers when I said that in principle, I am against private property. I am. Now, what I mean by that is that if I was starting a society from scratch, I would just guarantee housing as a human right. And the way I would guarantee that is that housing would kind of be orchestrated and facilitated by the state. We would all be renters. We would all pay into the system for a certain amount of time. After that time is over, then you just pay fees and upkeep. Like you'd be a renter for, say, 30 years, which is a typical mortgage, by the way. After 30 years, you only have to pay fees and upkeep of wherever it is you're living. There'd be different types of housing. If you have more means, obviously you'd have a bigger house than somebody who doesn't have as many means. What I'm saying is, if I was starting a society from scratch, that's what I would do. What I'm not saying, just for a quick disclaimer here, what I'm not saying is, hey, did you buy a house? You're part of the problem. I'm not saying that. That's ridiculous. Some of my friends have actually texted me and they're like, are you saying we shouldn't have bought our house? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about a principle where if I was building a society from scratch, that's what I would do. Obviously, that's not the society we live in. Obviously, that's not a change that I will see in my lifetime. So I'm not saying that if you participate in the market we were all born into, you're part of the problem. That's not what I'm saying at all. I myself, if I ever had an opportunity to buy property, I live in Southern California, so it's not in my short-term vision at all. But if I was ever in a situation where buying a house or an apartment or well, not apartment, you know what I mean, a condo or whatever, where that made sense, I would do it. Like that. That's not what I'm getting at here. But what I'm saying is, in our existing system, we can still put housing first. And housing should be a human right. And in Finland, they're going that route. They're making that happen in Finland. And we can make that happen in our system too. We can make that happen in our system too. We just choose not to. The powers that be choose it. We can't even get rent control. This is what they're doing in Finland. In the United States, we can't even get rent control. In California, we couldn't get rent control. The supposed progressive utopia of California. It's not, by the way. You know, I've lived around. I lived in the Northwest. I've lived in. I lived in Tennessee. I've lived in Pennsylvania. I've lived in Indiana. I've lived in Seattle, Washington. I've lived in Los Angeles, California. I got to tell you, you know, as far as there being progressive utopias in the United States, it doesn't exist. There is no actual progressive place in the United States. It just doesn't exist. Yeah, you have places where socially they're a little further along. Generally, I mean, some of the most progressive people I know live in Tennessee. Some of the most progressive people I know still live in Indiana. So you know, it's a generalization. But generally speaking, you know, do I feel like I fit in a little bit more in Seattle and Southern California compared to those other places in general? Yeah, you know, but it's not like there's some progressive utopia. So my point is that we're still so far from getting to something like what Finland's getting to, and it's a nationwide thing. And this is the type of change that starts in your backyard. This is the type of change where if you really had a city council that really wanted to tackle housing and said, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, this is the jobs it's going to bring. First of all, you know, I'm one of those people, I'm willing to speak the language of the pro-business government people when I have to. That's why I'm trying to get municipal broadband in Pasadena, city-owned internet. And I'm not shying away from saying this is an investment. This is a business investment. This will benefit businesses in the community. This will benefit investment from future small businesses. This will benefit our footprint in show business. I'm willing to say that because it's the truth. It is true. You know, not only is it morally a good thing to do because it assures a free and open internet and it's essential for the exchange of information. Not only does it help the people and provide people with quality internet at a more reasonable price, but it's also an investment for the community. Similarly, housing. Not only is it morally the right thing to do, that's the most important part, it's morally the right thing to do. Not only does it treat people like human beings, not only is it something we can afford to do many times over, but it's also an investment into a community. It brings about jobs. There's going to be jobs for counselors. There's going to be jobs for, you know, people to upkeep the maintenance on these buildings, to facilitate these buildings. There's going to be jobs for people to go out on the streets and find the people that need help. You know, instead of doing what San Francisco did, which, by the way, supposedly progressive utopia, San Francisco, instead of having robots out on the streets, trying to antagonize the homeless and chase them off. Why not have people on the streets who go out there and try to find people who need help, who maybe is suffering from significant schizophrenia or something like that, and getting them into a facility where they can get help and treatment? Imagine that job. That job where you help somebody, where your job is to take somebody off the street and put them into a real facility that's going to help them with counselors. That'd be a hell of a cool gig, wouldn't it? And it's not some crazy utopian dream. It's something that they're already doing in Finland. And if they can do it in Finland, they can certainly do it in the richest country in the world. So, there's that. Here's to a better tomorrow, right? At least that's a little uplifting. At least, there's somewhere in the world that's showing us, that's setting a good example. At least that's happening.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your